So I've been doing a lot of videos on this channel about philosophy, and I've wanted to get to videos on more impactful and meaningful topics like ethics, religion, economics. But there's a trap to talking about that kinds of things. It's really hard to get a well-rounded, meaningful conversation about those topics when anyone with a camera can just put their opinions online. And I see a problem all the time with internet intellectuals who they have biases and they have pitfalls, and some of them are very easy for me to see, and I really don't want to fall into those traps. I'm personally a non-competitive, non-confrontational person. I don't want to get into fights, I just want to talk about ideas and try to solve problems. And of course, I really like thinking logically and about topics like what is reality, what should we do, all the philosophical things. So I've been thinking for myself, I really want to talk about these subjects, but I feel like I have to provide a foundation, I have to go deep and lay out my metaphysical starting point, because I'm afraid people are going to say, oh, this is just another guy talking about religion on the internet, this is just another guy talking about economics on the internet, he doesn't know anything. So I felt like I had to lay out in excruciating detail my fundamental beliefs about reality and metaphysics as a place to start from, as any ethical question ultimately is grounded in what do you think is real? And if we can't agree on what's real, then how can we even have ethical discussions? So I'd sat on it for a long time, and I wrote script after script, and it just never seemed to work. I even recorded this video once before with a very detailed script, and it ended up being poor quality and I didn't post it. And I sat around for a long time and I was like, you know what? I should just go off the cuff. Because I spend time, when I'm thinking of videos, I will talk to myself. I will sit at my computer, I will pace around my apartment, and I'll just be talking as if I'm talking to a camera. And then I'm like, man, I really wish I had been recording that. So as you could probably tell, this video is much more rambly. I have no script for this, just the thoughts that I've been tumbling through my head again and again and again for months, years by this point. So this video is about my theory of reality, which I call evolutionary realism. It starts from the points that we've been talking about in previous videos with the idea that most things or most concepts are social constructs. And it's very, very hard to find something that is not a social construct. The classic example is objects. There's a saying, there comes a time when you have to call a spade a spade. But there's another time when you get to ask, what is a spade? And this applies to all objects. There's the ship of Theseus, which is if there's a ship and then you slowly replace every part of it piece by piece over the course of years, and then you end up with a completely different ship. Is that a different ship, or is it the same ship? And then if you take the original pieces and assemble them together to make a new ship, is that a new one or is it the original one? And the answer to this question, and the question of all objects, is it's what we agree to call it. That's the nature of a social construct. Take for instance this mug. It is a mug, as you can tell, but the question is, what exactly counts as a mug? Is it just the ceramic? Does the paint count? There's residue from my morning coffee. There's a little water from when I rinsed it out. Molecules from the air are getting stuck to it. Molecules from the cup are breaking off into the air. What about the air inside the cup? What about the space inside the cup? As some Asian philosophers like to say, the most useful part of a cup is the empty space inside. The answer, of course, to what exactly counts as cup and what does not is ultimately what we agree on. But let's take a step back. The important thing is not what is the mug, but can we communicate using the concept of a mug? If I say, hey, go to the cupboard and get me a mug, you know exactly what I mean. We don't have to break down the definitions and talk about metaphysics for you to say, go and get your own mug, you lazy bum. And this applies to all objects. There are no objects that are inherently isolated and defined within the universe. It's all based on what we collectively agree the boundaries are. We say, here is the stuff that counts as the object, and here is the stuff that does not count as it. So that's an example of a social construct. Most theories and concepts are social constructs. With some, it's easy to grasp, like the idea of rights. That's clearly a social construct. Other things like morality, it takes more argumentation. It takes more getting into the definitions and seeing exactly what we mean by the words we're saying. Arguably, there are objective things to say about morality, maybe even real dimensions of morality. But again, it comes down to the exact definitions of what we're talking about. And then there's things like math and science. You might think that science is revealing truths that are hard set in stone that cannot be changed, and it gets to the point where if you believe something, like science, once it gets developed, tells you what is reasonable to believe and what is unreasonable to believe. And that is true to a certain degree, but that's the thing, only to a certain degree. Because science relies on foundational assumptions, such as Newton's first law of motion. An object in an inertial frame will remain in that inertial frame unless acted on by an outside force. Now you might think we could easily falsify this. We could find a force that does not change an object's inertial frame. Or we could find something that is not a force that changes an object's inertial frame. However, it doesn't work like that because this is a theory, it is a framework, it is a paradigm, a point of view, where if we find that thing that is not a force that causes a change in inertial frame, we just define it as a force. Or if we find a force that does not change an object's inertial frame, we just redefine it as not a force. Newton's first law, therefore, is not falsifiable. It is a premise, it is an axiom, it is a foundational assumption that we base the rest of Newtonian physics on. And all of science is like this. There are foundational principles, foundational axioms and assumptions that we grant. Then on top of that, we take our observations and data and craft theories and fit the data and make predictions and invent technology. Now, will the technology stop working if we go for a different theory of physics? No, of course not. Because the function of technology is part of reality. The theory that creates the technology is not real, but the technology itself and what it does and how it works is. What about math? Math, you think, okay, that is something that is clearly objective. It is absolutely true because it's based on proofs. There are fundamental axioms, and then you construct theorems and consequences from those axioms using the process of mathematical proof. And that works, so we know with absolute certainty that, for instance, 1 times 1 equals 1, and definitely not 2. There are plenty of ways to be closed-minded when it comes to math, such as thinking math is all about the real numbers. Well, we could extend the math to the imaginary numbers as well, but also we could recognize that there is a much, much greater space of possible mathematics of which the real numbers are just one small subset. It's often common to talk about the real numbers as a group. There are other groups, such as symmetry groups, where you reflect things and rotate them, and you can assign every possible operation a symbol, which could be a number, and then there's an operation, which is what order you do the things in. With the real numbers, we have the numbers and the decimals and whatnot, and we have the operations, plus, minus, multiply, and divide. And really the foundational operation of the real numbers is plus, because every other operation can be defined in terms of plus. So my point in that is that if we think of math as the absolute truth, there is a sense in which it is not, because we're just being closed-minded and there is a much greater field of math that what we're thinking about is just one subset. Another way in which math is not objective is because all math relies on foundational axioms. These are the assumptions, the foundational rules that all the other ideas in that domain of math are built upon. And it was proved by Kurt Gödel and some others around the same time that math cannot be proof complete. That is, math cannot entirely prove itself. You can't prove all the axioms and the theorems that spawn from the axioms. That is the incompleteness theorem. So in principle, you could start from a place of different axioms and different definitions and different operations and come up with a theory that functionally does the same thing as arithmetic, but you're using entirely different symbols and entirely conceptually different logic, even if it might be actually identical logic. Anyway, that was a long-winded way of saying that Math 2 has social construct elements to it. So the question is, when every concept and every theory and so many things are social constructs, what really is reality? What is the foundation beneath it all? And my statement is that the reality behind everything is actions and consequence. It is cause and effect. That exists outside of concepts. It is things that we do, and these things have effects in the rest of reality. They come back and affect us with their consequences, and they affect everyone around us as well. So if we start from a foundation that reality is cause and effect, and we interact with this reality through our actions and receive from the reality via consequences, then it makes sense for us humans, being who we are within reality, to construct a theory of reality that starts from a premise of cause and effect and the forces that drive them. So here's how I think of reality. There's a state, and within that state there are forces that change it moving forward in the future. Now, it may turn out that time itself is not fundamental and it emerges from other interaction stuff, but that is a subject for another time. So basically there's a state of reality containing forces within it. Those forces change the state of reality into the future. Now, I'm not talking about Newtonian forces, although those do contribute. I'm just talking about forces in general. That is, anything that causes anything to happen, or anything that causes change of any kind. Again, this is similar to Newton's first law in that it is a paradigm. If you find something that causes change that isn't a force, I will say, I define that as a force in this theory. If you find a force that doesn't cause a change, I will say, I define that as not a force in this theory. So what does the state include? Well, it includes all possible things that could have an effect. It might be that all aspects of a state are forces that change it into the future. Or there may be other things that are not forces that still count as part of the state. I haven't developed it that far. So as the state evolves, it changes. And the forces that drive the change also change. So what counts as part of this state? Well, it is all the things of reality, and it is also all the social constructs. Those social constructs are real from a certain point of view, that point of view being because we agree they are. So we, as part of reality, participate in the changing of reality. We are forces in reality. We are part of the state. And that means our beliefs, our concepts, are also part of the state. I mean, like the state of things, the way things are. I do not mean national state. That is different. So what happens is we get causes making effects that change the state of reality, which in turn makes new causes that change the state of reality again, and it keeps changing. And some things are organized in a way that lets them persist across time, and some things disperse away. And that is where the evolution comes in. The future is made of that which is created and that which survives. Most notable about this is that there is no such thing as a natural state. Sometimes forces can cause changes to reverse themselves and go back to how it was before, but sometimes changes are permanent and things are different forever. So if we want to be in tune with reality and remain active and effective in the world, we have to keep in mind that at this moment in time, reality is slightly different than it's ever been before. And we have to keep ourselves sharp and observant and pay attention to what's really happening in front of our eyes. Because what worked yesterday may not work today, and what works today may not work tomorrow. So that's my theory of evolutionary realism. It is not a true theory of reality. I have not proved it absolutely, and I have no intention of trying. There are plenty of other theories of reality, many of which work well to other people. So if this one doesn't work for you, feel free to have your own theory. But I do challenge you to think critically and clearly about what your theory of reality is, because it is ultimately the foundation of all of your other beliefs. Having a solid, valid, useful theory of reality is important because it helps us to be effective in the world. It helps us to accurately predict what the consequences of our potential actions will be so that we can make responsible choices and effectively work toward our goals. Whether those goals be to live in accordance with our values, or to mobilize people for a cause, or to survive and thrive as an individual, or as a family, or as a company, or a nation, or a world. That's going to be it for this video. Thanks a lot for watching. Let me know what you think in the comments. If I made assumptions or I haven't thought of things, please let me know. I always like to have new ideas to help me think. If you think what I do is valuable, you can support me on Patreon like these cool people. And if you want to be notified with future videos, you can hit the subscribe button and the notifications bell. I know if you're subscribed to a bunch of channels, I don't upload that often, so if you don't want to miss when I do, the bell really helps. Thanks again for watching. I'll see you next time.